Hello everyone, I hope all is well. Thanks for sharing the work and thanks for liking the videos and telling your friends about it. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. This week I want to explore inclusion and diversity. Are these two concepts under attack? And the other section of this video will explore the exclusion of white men. Are white men being excluded? That's some thought in academia and a few places. Now, let's get started. If you were to close your eyes and consider the various discourses connected to inclusion and diversity, it would take a long time. And if I gave you 5 minutes, could you list all the factors? Certainly not. Yes, race and gender may have been on everyone's top list if you were doing this. However, 60 years ago, it would have been relatively easy to do so. Let's put things into perspective. The call back then in the 1950s and 60s was for really equality and justice for all. However, the phrases for attention may have changed. Notwithstanding, the mission of equality continues and the attack on equality also continues. Inclusion and diversity have always been under attack before the founding of America, during the work of the founding fathers of America. And let me say, currently, there's a struggle for equality. While the terms may have been changed, the agenda for inclusion was broadened, and with this, we had further exclusion. The issue for justice for all is seemingly elusive, and of course, equity and justice seems to be under attack. While we have made some progress, we must admit that the push at the national and institutional level towards inclusion has left some people wondering what progress has been completed thus far. While we are not in the 1950s, I have to admit that on reflection, I can see strategies for inclusion that have not gone in the right way. As a matter of fact, some of these strategies tend to disenfranchise groups. Oftentimes, the system that is being deployed to enhance inclusion is the same system that excludes individuals. The lack of progress can be attributed to our society avoiding historical issues connected to exclusion. These issues are also compounded by a diverse population seeking equality. Inclusion will always be under attack if various exclusionists hold power or work as wolf in sheep's clothing. The killing of people because of the color of their skin or religion or sexual orientation again suggests that the need for inclusion is ever present. The attack on inclusion is ideological and based on extremist perspectives that will continue to cause the death of innocent people. The attack on inclusion also challenges critical theories that explain why we are in this situation of inequality. As I stated in one of my papers back in 2007, critical race theory is a perspective that seeks to examine and identify cultural and structural components in our society that help in the suppression or marginalization of people. Yes, CRT recognizes that racism is a fabric of our society, and within this fabric, we will have privileges. So why attack CRT, which seeks to highlight areas for attention? The attack on CRT highlights the attack on equality, justice, inclusion, diversity, and also the need for change. CRT can also be used to examine a wide range of areas including education inequality, cultural responsive pedagogy. It can also be used to examine the framework for the need for inclusion, and of course it can examine major disparities in our society. The reality is that discussion using CRT will allow members of our society to reflect on their organizational roles that they have in reproducing inequality in the organization and the society, as well as the community. As I reflect, it seems to me that inclusion and diversity initiatives have become so splintered that there appear to be no collective effort to advance inclusion in our society. In other words, there seems to be a competition of groups to be included. At times, many advocates for inclusion fail to understand that you cannot have inclusion at the expense of others. Yes, let me say that again. You cannot have inclusion at the expense of others. Let me use an example to highlight my point. Yes, I love cooking and I love entertaining. I love to do my barbecue pork and my barbecue chicken. And for example, one day I decided to have a Jamaican party and invited my friends. Of course, my friends are black, white, you name them, they're coming to have fun. As I inquired about their food preference, I realized that one of my friends, he is a Rastafarian. Therefore, the Rastafarians do not eat pork. Rather than say to everyone that they should be a vegetarian on that day, I decided to prepare his food. Of course, it's going to be vegetarian. So I make sure I prepare his food on that given day, separate from where the pork or meat kind is going to be prepared. And I'm going to serve him on a different space, of course. So his food is prepared. So on the day of the event, his food is placed and ready. Within the context, everyone was accommodated. We must be honest and intentional if we are to go the inclusion road. In this case, I accommodated my friend and all the other friends. This accommodation allowed everyone to enjoy the wonderful Jamaican feast. Yes, we can solve our cultural differences. We can solve our issues of inclusion if we think proactively by offering accommodation rather than excluding others. Yes, inclusion is under attack because if we exclude dominant players, then we have a problem. And this brings me to the point regarding, are white men being excluded? Whoa, Rohan, you went there. Yes, no, hear me out. It is becoming more common to exclude people we perceive as having privileges. Let us be honest, the inclusion story is not only about gender, it's not only about race, it's not only about color, it's not only about culture, and it's not only about historical issues. The reality is that the inclusion story is about the now. It's about the now and ensuring that everyone has a sense of belonging, not just one group. It's not about the inclusion of one person at the expense of the majority. It is also about accommodating differences to build a diverse and inclusive world. If we are to build a framework on inclusion, we must build a framework on equity, equality, and justice for all. This means we should not dismiss voices or perspectives that are different from our personal views. If we do ignore these voices, it is indeed a violation of the key principles of inclusion. Hence, my critical question is, have we been excluding white males from our inclusive frameworks? One study in 2017 stated that some white men felt excluded at work. The men in the study believed that they were overlooked for promotion and other opportunities. In addition, the study indicated that white men were not included in diversity initiatives, not selected for mentorship, and furthermore, not given the opportunities for professional development. Another report titled "White Men Are Feeling Left Out of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion" was published in 2022 by Forbes. The report suggests that white men felt that they were being left out within their mission of their organization, which has application to gender, race, ethnicity, etc. Another report published in the Washington Post stated a third of Americans in a national survey suggested that diversity had overlooked white men. It simply means white men were not a part of the diversity agenda. There are other reports that I could have mentioned. However, the fundamental questions are, should we ignore these reports? Should we give validity to these voices? I am somewhat wary of taking a historical position to say that since one group was excluded, it's the other group to be included now. That does not make sense or does not safeguard an inclusive future. Let's look at the fact as it relates to inclusion. It is for all, not some. As I stated before, inclusion cannot be gained at the expense of excluding one group. Let us remember, inclusion requires the assistance of all community members. The greater the division in our society, the greater the levels of exclusion. The isolation of any dominant group in our society can have diverse consequences. We know that. We've seen that. Notwithstanding, everyone with a mission for inclusion must understand the need to provide equitable support for those in our society who have been historically marginalized. In other words, white men may need to reflect on the need for equity for other groups who have been marginalized over the years historically. This is going to be a part of their mission if we are truly to have a society that is reflective of historical positions. Remember, the issue of white privilege comes very handy within this framework because at birth, the color gives white men a preference. Notwithstanding, we should never ignore what is being shared with us, but look at it from a perspective that will inform our positions in the future. If we are not careful, we can be excluding others by our own actions. At times, I feel that inclusionists believe that inclusion can be achieved at the expense of excluding specific populations in our society. The reality is, let us face it, inclusion is all about fairness. Not just for one person, but for all. Let me state and remember this point as I close. The bottom line is that you can't have inclusion, and I say that again, you can't have inclusion at the cost of excluding several people or the majority in your society. Those are my critical thoughts.